Okay, so today on Chuku's Chats, we are speaking to Craig Umenyi. Now, Craig is a performance nutritionist working in the Premier League alongside top-notch chefs to ensure the top-notch players get everything they need to excel on match day, maximize their performance, and obviously speed up recovery. He also works with elite teenage motor racing drivers, helping these athletes to improve their physical and mental performance. So, hello, Craig. Nice to see you again.
Hey.
How are you?
Thanks for inviting me on. I'm really honored actually to have a bit of a conversation with you.
You're most welcome.
All right, so today we're going to continue to chop, chat, chill. So when we chop, we're going to be talking about things like food and other things that nourish you. And then when we chat, we know there was a particular topic that you wanted us to talk about, which Mecca and I actually really looking forward to getting into. And then we'll chill. So we'll wrap up with some things on culture, music, and travel and that sort of stuff.
Nice.
Cool. So let's chop. Craig, if you were cooking for one of your heroes, what would you cook and who would you cook for and why?
Ooh.
Love that. Boom. First one.
It's such a different. I was kind of putting a question like this, mainly because one, like it's really difficult to, like for me anyway, maybe for some other people, but to say like a hero, like I know a lot of people maybe look to people in their industries as maybe their hero, so to speak. I guess I know it's a bit kind of cliche because I hate saying like an athlete because there's so many people who do things that like are bigger and more important in this life than sport. But I'd probably say it'd be one of three. So it's going to be how I answer a lot of my questions. I'm never going to be precise and give you one example. So I'd say that LeBron James, because I just think like a huge, like an incredible athlete, but I think a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of the stuff that he does beyond basketball for the local community and really puts his money where his mouth is, which a lot of athletes don't always do. Of course, I'm also aware of a lot of athletes who do that stuff and it isn't as publicized. Secondly, would probably be Serena Williams. I just think to be a black woman in the field of tennis and dominate to the degree that she has. I mean, I can't think of many other sports where probably I don't think people would frown so much if you just said Serena Williams may be the greatest tennis player of all time, period, male or female. And then the third one usually gets a bit of a laugh. I'd probably say Alan Shearer. I grew up a Newcastle United fan, so yeah, Alan Shearer would be the third one. But in terms of what I would cook, I don't really have a go-to recipe, if I'm honest, which I hate to say because I do like cooking. I'm usually when I'm having people around for dinner, I have a few like Ottolenghi cookbooks. So I often do kind of like I'm always confident I've got some sort of like Middle Eastern type spices in my cupboard. So I feel like as long as I've got like some vegetables, I can rustle something up. I usually do like a roasted aubergine dish. So if you come to my house and I've not done that dish for you, then I probably, like, you know what I mean? Like it's a compliment if I've done that dish. So yeah, that would probably be, it would be somewhere in that realm that I'd be looking to cook.
Nice.
Right, so we've got Serena, LeBron, and Alan Shearer having some roasted aubergine.
Yeah, there's a really strong lineup.
Just to add, like there'd be a meat dish in there. I'd probably, like probably be lamb or be some chicken. But yeah, like I like the kind of, I guess not quite tapas, but similar to yourself. Like I like the idea of having like multiple different dishes. So there'd be a few vegetable side dishes, like a meat main and things like that. So.
Are we getting a dessert? I've got a sweet tooth. I'm just wondering, should they expect dessert or are you going to ask them to bring it along?
No, so bad. The dessert game needs to step up. Like I tried in lockdown. I know the whole like the banana bread was like a big thing, and yeah, I try with desserts, but it's just like I put so much energy into that, and then I'm like, oh, here's some ice cream and some fruit or something like that. Yeah, and I hate it. So yeah, that needs to up the ante. But again, come back to inspiration. That chin chin cheesecake at yours was mind blowing. So yeah, maybe something along those lines if I can get my creative head on.
I think it'd be cool to be like, listen, guys, like LeBron, you're gonna meet Serena. Serena, you're gonna meet LeBron. Alan Shearer, you're gonna meet LeBron. Sorry, Alan. not like very good, very good. Just not sure his levels are top. So I'll be like, look, everyone bring a dessert. Bring a little bottle of wine, whatever, and then you can just do the mains and just keep it cool.
I know. I feel cheated. I feel like I'm cheating people by doing that, but you know, like I feel like people always give you the get out of jail free card with that. Like if they're really happy with the stuff from the main, they're like, oh, don't worry about it. I know you're busy. Yeah, it's fine. So,
It's not like Serena and LeBron just flew over from like the US to be here. But, like, yeah.
And I can't even rustle up like a decent dessert.
Mate, like at the worst case scenario, you get one of those like Mr. Kipling like strudel things you bang in the oven with like some sort of caramel ice.
Nah. You know what? Okay, if I was to do a dessert, so it goes off trend. If I was to do a dessert, it'd be like a brownie or something like that. I had a dinner party the other week, and I tried to do I did a cookie dough, but it was probably like in there a little bit too long, so it kind of went past that point of being doughy. You know, so kind of like a cookie and a dough, and it worked. But yeah, I need to get better on that.
All right, so maybe we're getting cookie dough. I think anything's good as long as it's not jelly and ice cream. Do you know what I mean? Like
jelly and ice cream's hard.
No, jelly and ice cream in primary school. They're not 6.
What do you mean?
And the vanilla ice cream has to be like good quality. Don't give me the bright yellow like chunk rectangle slabs.
Oh my god!
It has to be good. It has to have. I need to see signs that there's vanilla pod in it. Like if you're gonna give me a vanilla ice cream, it has to be like a good vanilla ice cream.
I remember those like bright, like uber bright, like plates and like plastic plates and bowls they used to give it to, and they're like they were superb because you could like literally fling them across like and they'd never go. I mean, obviously that's what you give to like a 6-7-year-old, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, you know someone's gonna be like tipping it up into their head, so like you're gonna give them some like good china, are you? So school days. Cool. So let's get into this chat.
Okay, so you'd wanted to speak about mental and emotional health, particularly around vulnerability and compassion. So I guess starting off, why was that the topic that you wanted us to talk about?
I just think it's like so relevant right now, and I know, like I would say in recent years that the stigma of mental health has changed so much, but I think, you know, right now, like a lot of things, coronavirus has really taken center stage. And of course, that has a huge knock-on effect in terms of the immediate concerns of like the actual pandemic virus itself, and then economic aspects. And I know mental health kind of gets touched on a little bit, but I feel like ultimately everyone's been affected by this, whether it's, and it doesn't necessarily just mean those who maybe have lost their jobs or actually lost people to the illness and things like that, which of course are huge. But I think it's like so against our being as humans to just almost like isolate from each other, and that kind of lack of like physical contact and touch, face-to-face interaction. And for me, I think one thing I've really learned is to lean into the fact of, if I'm not feeling like quite right, just me personally, I will say that to my friends and family. And I found that when I've actually done that, and you do that with people, it really kind of opens up that, like it gives them almost permission to do that. And I think a lot of the time people, especially men, I don't think always do. And I've been kind of like surprised at the number of people who have come back to me and been like, you know what, yeah, this is, and you can kind of start to see it and feel it. And, you know, maybe you don't hear from people as regularly and things like that. But I think coming back to that kind of idea of vulnerability and compassion is, I mean, sometimes it can be quite scary for us to say that we're not on top form, or to say that we're, you know, like sometimes I think people again, the stigmas, we've done so much with the stigma, but I think sometimes people still identify it when it happens to them. It's like, as a society, we kind of recognize that it's okay if it happens to other people, but sometimes when we're maybe a little bit fragile ourselves, that we're kind of the last people to know. So I just think in that aspect of like learning that it's okay to come forward with that and admit that, I think, especially in this time, it actually helps build genuine connection, which we're lacking more so than ever right now. And it doesn't mean we have to like bond over kind of like not feeling great, but I feel that there's like, I just think it's important that we do and we look out for each other, and things, unfortunately, probably only going to get worse going through winter. And people are going to be more and more affected by, you know, the weather and finances and things like that. And I just think it's really important that people talk about and give that kind of like room to breathe, that if you're not feeling great or you're not, you know, you're not in top form, just kind of like admitting that to someone, and allowing that conversation to allow you to be a bit more compassionate with yourself. Just lastly on that, I think probably like a lot of people in the initial period stages of this, it's like really easy. So I was put on furlough for 2 months, and I think in that period, like a lot of people, you've got all this time, and there's almost this pressure to be like really, really productive. And that's kind of almost like what we do. And it's like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but sometimes that can be, I think, like a little bit of like a defense mechanism, to do like a bit of a distraction. And it took me like a good few weeks, probably even a few months during this period to realize that learning more and doing online courses and doing all these online conferences was like, yeah, it was good and it was useful and it was interesting. But actually I probably learned a lot more from this like 2020 period, when I actually started to like open up and connect with people and allow people to do that back with me. So I think it's like a really important topic at the moment, and one that I hope doesn't kind of lose ground as this kind of just continues to develop.
Yeah.
No, if you go.
Okay, cool. I suppose there's a couple of questions. The first question I actually wanted to ask, and I'm not usually I ask like 2 questions at once, but I'm not going to do that today. How was it like? So obviously, you know, a lot of the non-playing staff are the ones affected by that. But then also you have, you know, playing staff whose kind of career or season was, you know, put on hold for a bit of time and then never turn. And especially like I'm thinking about like, you know, players who are not, you know, from the UK, or, you know, the young players, and they're isolated from, you know, their families and stuff like that. How is that all like manifested at the club, and said both playing and non-playing staff? And you know, how does that then affect their performance? You know, something that you're kind of focusing on from a nutrition side, but they may be impacted from like a mental health and emotional health kind of side.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably what it's partly the reason why I highlighted it to me is, again, we often look at maybe athletes and celebrities, movie stars, etc., as kind of like living in their own world, and it really kind of highlights this is, I wouldn't say it's, I don't like the idea that like coronavirus was like this great equalizer, because we know that reality is there are huge groups in society who are much more affected directly and indirectly by the virus than other people. But of course, you notice it even with some of the athletes that I work with. Like you mentioned, they may not necessarily be from the UK, so they might be by themselves. It might just be them and a partner. Especially players from athletes maybe from places like Latin America, where their culture is a lot more like socializing is a bigger thing. Even things like eating meals, where that kind of UK culture that isn't always the case. So there's like these huge changes to people's lives, and yeah, I think really, you know, I think everyone was affected by it to some degree, and that, yeah, I wouldn't say I was necessarily surprised by that, but again, I think sometimes when you work very closely with these people, you get a different perspective to maybe what the outside world does, and you realize that they're kind of just like human beings like the rest of us, and they can have like really nice homes and things like that, but most of us probably felt a little bit trapped and didn't have the same kind of, you know, I went for a period where I used to really love kind of coming back home, because it's like your safe space, isn't it? Like after a long day, like to rewind, like to relax, sorry, and unwind. And then when you're like kind of forced to be inside, it doesn't really feel like that. So it doesn't matter like how nice your home is. Ultimately, it's kind of like too much of a good thing.
I was thinking about what you were saying about you, and correct me if I'm wrong, in this particular period, you learned how to reach out. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I think so. From that, like I didn't choose the topic to speak about me because I don't think I was necessarily like hugely affected by it. I think it's just something I'm probably quite self-aware as a person. So I was kind of maybe a little bit more aware of being affected by it than maybe some of my friends or other people that I know. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's that it highlighted it to me or brought it to my attention, but it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that other people are also going through this. And I found that actually being able to share maybe that a little bit about myself helped to actually bring out that conversation in other people.
And also, so when you were talking about, I thought it was really interesting you said about how everyone was like trying to keep busy, essentially as some sort of distraction. And I was just interested in the other ways that you think you see, and again, not necessarily with yourself, but maybe just from the people you work with, even the people that you spend time with, the different ways that you think people maybe try and, I guess, like numb themselves to what it is that they might be thinking or feeling at a particular point.
Yeah, so I'm really interested in it from like a food perspective, because I think people do that a lot with food. You know, food is so emotive, as you guys know. Like, so the whole experience of coming into your restaurant is, it's not just the food. You've made a lot of effort into the emotional experience that like a customer feels coming in with a group of friends to dine. And you know, like a lot of us, some people have really good relationships with food. Some people maybe don't. Some people have quite a neutral relationship. But I do find it interesting is like food is definitely one of those avenues where when maybe people feel a bit grouchy or a bit tired, maybe they're not sleeping enough, or like mood is low, or like there's loads of different things, like how you respond to food. Even something as, I was saying this to a colleague, like an office-based colleague the other day, where I noticed that it gets to a point in like 10 o'clock in the morning and she'll go and have a snack. And when we're speaking about it, it's always like when she's doing like a document or like an email, and you just kind of hit that, you know, it's a task that you really don't want to be doing. And it's just like this like fork in the road moment where like, okay, I need to probably dig a little bit deeper just for like this 10, 15 minutes to actually get this done. And she's like, yeah, I realized actually I do go to get that snack to kind of, to break that up. And I was like, yeah, like it makes a lot of sense. It's small things like that. But of course, on like a bigger scale, I wouldn't say that's necessarily affected people that I know directly, but of course, there's things like alcohol. I just think people like maybe not looking after themselves so much. It can be like numerous different things, but I do think busyness, of course, that's like really good. But I think obviously we live in a society a lot of the time where, especially right now, we've got a lot of time on our hands, so it can be quite easy to maybe like compare yourself to others, and you almost feel like maybe you've never got enough or you never are enough. And as a result, I think it can be really, really, like, we live in a society that really values that busyness. So like, it's really easy, I think, sometimes to be like, okay. So when like for me, when I was furloughed, I almost felt guilty if I wasn't, for that first few weeks, if I wasn't doing anything. But I also have other friends who are really slammed and busy with their jobs. So it's amazing, like how I think just like how different people respond. And of course, none of those things are bad. You know, like eating, having alcohol isn't necessarily bad. Being like wanting to be productive and get things done. And of course, things like this give opportunity for a lot of people to give an opportunity even for me to think about things moving forward in the future. But yeah, so I guess maybe it's about kind of like striking that balance and being a little bit more kind of like kind to yourself, to not give yourself such a hard time if things aren't exactly where you want them to be. Because ultimately, like, this is just a year that like there isn't a blueprint for how to handle this.
You mentioned about being like you yourself being really, or you feel yourself, you're self-aware, and then obviously being like comfortable at sharing how you're feeling. I was just wondering, like, where's that kind of ability to be self-aware, that self-awareness come from, and where's that like ability, I suppose, to allow yourselves to be vulnerable? Like how, or are there any kind of like practical steps that you would like encourage other people to share, especially in a way where you're thinking about how you can do that so that you can help other people, essentially share as well?
Yeah, you know what? That's a really good point. I think I can't necessarily say where that self-awareness came from. I guess I think like most things had to be a bit of a natural curiosity in yourself to like with anything, whenever you learn, whether it's about yourself, you learn about history, or you learn about like a topic or anything like that, there has to be some curiosity into it. So I think part of it's that, but yeah, I mean, from a practical perspective, I think it was partly actually the fact that life kind of quietened down. So you start to just maybe like notice things a bit more on like a day-to-day basis. Obviously, a lot of people don't necessarily have, like maybe you're in situations where like right now I'm back at work and my routine is like non-existent. So, but some of that work that maybe I've kind of done has like enlightened me a little bit, I guess, to still recognize that stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily like my expertise or my field. So unfortunately, like, I couldn't necessarily really say, but I think there's an element of just kind of being like noticing, being on. I think first of all, it's like starting with like being honest about yourself and like I notice it with like say some of my friends or people close to me, like through their interactions. So I might notice that there's maybe like, okay, I've not heard from them so much, or maybe they're a little bit short with me, or those sorts of things. That's really, really difficult when you're in it and you're the person doing that, because I've definitely been there, and it's quite difficult to really, really kind of have that self-awareness. But I think if you're open to the fact that I think it comes from a place that if you're not so defensive about the fact that maybe you aren't, like you might have not flaws, but if you're open to the fact that there might be behaviors and you might not always act in a way which is always like quote unquote right, then I think you start to open your eyes a little bit more to some of that stuff. But that's a really, really good question, and I probably just waffled a little bit there. But yeah, that's definitely food for thought even for me.
Can I continue? Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So obviously, I know a lot of people highlight how that inability to be like vulnerable is, but probably or possibly, I would say possibly, because I think it's something that's said like, oh, it's more like in men, and that ladies are more willing to be like more vulnerable. I'm not sure that's. I mean, I would have to see some stats, right? But like, I'm just on that anecdotally, like men seem to be like willing to be less vulnerable. What I was just trying to work out, like, as a guy, especially as I'm also a guy, I think I'm quite self-aware and actually willing to like, speak to people about like, okay, if you actually ask how I'm feeling, like, why is it that like, so many of us don't feel like comfortable? Yeah, where's that? What's that thing that's kind of, yeah, especially in today's society where I don't know, like I don't think there's like so much pressure to like bottle things up, but maybe I don't feel that way, whereas other people maybe have that continuous pressure.
Yeah, you know what? I think that's a really good point about yourself, Mecca, because I remember probably a few months ago, like, you had messaged me, and I took like a few weeks to respond. I was just really bad with like socializing and getting back to people. It just really didn't really feel necessarily that something I was on top of. And I was just like, oh, you know what? When I got back to you, I was like, I'm really sorry. Been back to work. Obviously, that's been a huge change for me. Just trying to get on with that has been a bit of an adjustment. And I just felt like totally comfortable in saying that because of the relationship that we have now. I'm aware a lot of people don't necessarily have that. And I think maybe with men, I think you raise a good point there. I think there's definitely, I think there's that maybe kind of less stigma about that. But then I do think right now, I think you can almost see it sometimes a little bit more because we're almost in a little bit more of survival mode. Like people are very fearful just very fearful in general. And usually when people are fearful, to actually be open and to be vulnerable, like to show what is perceived as that weakness is really, really difficult for people to do. So to admit that maybe you're not feeling great when, you're worried about job security, or, you might have very real fears about catching a virus, you've got a family, you've got a mortgage, these different things. I think that's very difficult for people to do. And of course, we just live in a culture where there's a big social media element. So we're always trying to put forward like kind of our best selves and our best life. And of course, that sometimes generates like different levels of comparison and things like that. So I think then to admit that, I think it's quite easy to sometimes get caught up in like there being a standard whenever you feel like you're maybe not at that standard, and that there's something kind of holding you back from that. It's quite difficult to say that. But I think that's a really good point. I don't think it is just like necessarily men or women, but I think men are probably like a lot worse at it, and that's something that I'm probably a little bit fearful of as a society. Is I think there will be, a lot more men and women, but just take men as the example here of people being out of work, maybe living by themselves, isolating, not looking after themselves. And I think a lot of the time men don't usually have I'm very fortunate, and I think you're the same, Emeka, like I think have pretty good social groups. So I feel you can always have those honest conversations, but I know a lot of people don't necessarily feel like they can do that. And then again, if you've not got I'm very fortunate, my friendship group, no one really fears having that conversation. So it feels really authentic to be able to talk openly. A lot of people, a lot of men don't ever feel that that's normal. So they're actually really scared of just like how people would respond to them. Maybe their mates wouldn't want to do the same social interactions and things like that. But I've never found anyone who really kind of struggled with that information when you put it to them. If you're really struggling, that is anyway. But that's just me.
Cool.
Sorry, I was just thinking about what you were saying, and I think another thing that is kind of in this current time has compounded everything is almost I think there's this other layer of guilt as well. Things aren't that bad for you.
What do you mean?
Yes.
So for example, it happened with you earlier on. I asked you a question and you said, "Oh, I mean, like I wasn't that affected that much." And so it's kind of like, well, because people have lost jobs and lost lives, and maybe you're feeling a little bit down because you haven't been able to see a mate for a bit.
Yeah.
You kind of start rationalizing like, oh, like come on, like that's not what's happened to me isn't that bad. So
I feel like I've been sussed out. Like, but you know what? This is the importance of these conversations, because you're right. I think part of it is there's that. That's a really good point. There's like a thin line between, not necessarily say too thin, but between being like, I guess, downplaying it and being grateful. So that's one thing that I've definitely learned in this period is, I messaged Emeka after I went to the restaurant the other day. I was just like, you know what, in this situation and some of the stuff going on with my family at the moment, at those nights of actually being able to go to the restaurant and on like Nigerian Independence Day, when my dad's Nigerian, and be able to have like a really nice family experience. That's something like I'm so much more grateful for than I've ever been in like my adult life. But you're absolutely spot on. Like it's quite easy to downplay things, comparing it to other people, and that does absolutely, like for a lot of people, kind of reinforce that guilt. But ultimately, everyone's got some sort of struggle, and yeah, you're right. I think some people are a little bit scared of it being like a comparison. But there is definitely elements of that when people are dying and people are losing jobs. It's yeah, you're right. I feel like I've just been sussed out live on
Right, yeah, I think it's really interesting what you said, like, because ultimately there's that comparison with the positives or people's like highlights, but then also the comparison with people's negatives, right? Where you're like, oh, so okay, so on one side you're like, oh, it's not great for me because look how great it is for someone else, and the other side you're like, oh, but it's not that bad for me because look at what else is going around the world. And it's actually like, well, like what a weird place to be, like on both sides, feeling that.
You're right. I think probably the best way for, just from me, I think the best way for me to kind of get around that is to not think too much of the other end when you're feeling like you're at one of those ends, if that makes sense. So to think that it's very easy to, when maybe things aren't great or you're not feeling so great in yourself, for people to constantly thinking about the things that they don't have at that other end. And yeah, it's probably just a little bit about trying to find that, like being aware of both ends of the spectrum. So I'm very aware that I've got a job, I've got an amazing family, amazing friendship group, I've got things to look forward to for the time being whilst we're not in lockdown, maybe going that way, who knows. But then, of course, and you know, I'm also very grateful of the fact that of those things. But yeah, of course, there's obviously like kind of just freedoms and liberties that you're used to that have been taken away or changed. And we're human beings, so we adapt. But everyone adapts at their own pace, at their own time, to different degrees. I think it's maybe just giving yourself a little bit more room to recognise that.
I think before we move on, like it reminds me of something that my dad said to me like years ago, and he said basically that your feelings are always valid. And I think that's so true. Now how you might respond is not like, I don't think people can always excuse how they might respond in certain situations to their feelings. I would just put that out there. But I think that's so true. I think if we could all learn that our feelings are valid, and like you might, if you're upset because literally, I don't know, you spilled your milk, right? And we sometimes get so caught up on like, oh, it's so stupid, I shouldn't be upset about the spilled milk. But often that feeling or emotion is maybe an indicator of something else. It may be at that moment in time you're feeling like nothing's going right for you. So, but when we like brush it over and go like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way, we kind of cut off that curiosity that you mentioned. Like we almost stop ourselves going like following that path and going like, okay, what's happening for me here right now? And so yeah, it's something that like, yeah, I've been learning, I've been trying to practice, or I do try and practice, like, and practice is the right word because I haven't got it yet, but like recognizing, oh, actually, if I'm feeling away, like it's valid, and you might be upset because you can't see your mate every week or your house party's got cancelled, and someone else might be upset because they haven't seen their mum in a few months, and they're not actually to be compared because it's just different things, it's like different upsets.
Yeah, I think
I love the nutrition reference about spilling milk as well. Very applicable.
Keeping on trend.
Very on trend.
Cool. Yeah, we're gonna chill a little bit now. So
yeah, I feel like we need that. It was a good conversation, but like, I really appreciate that conversation. Thank you for allowing me to share that topic. It's good that you two are good friends of mine. So it's something I feel like even if we weren't on camera, we'd be having this conversation maybe in your restaurant. But yeah, I think it's good to relax a little bit now.
It's a pleasure. Like, and actually, when we get to, one thing, Eva and I, people don't necessarily know, right, about one of the reasons, and I say one of the reasons because there were many reasons why we do like the small sharing place, is about the chat, is about the socializing. And I think there's, in some cases, a view that socializing is this high frequency energy that, that you give off. You leave your house and you're really bubbly. But look, socializing is about connecting with that person and enriching that relationship. And then sometimes someone that you're connecting with isn't at that place. And you need to just actually be at a level, and like, so actually one of the things what we actually felt with the sharing place was actually enabling conversations, that ability for people just to lean in that bit more, rather than like, this is my plate. Actually, we're all sharing this plate, and thus we're sharing this experience, and thus we're sharing this conversation, and then we're sharing this relationship. So there's actually a lot of.
So funny about that. So just before we move on. When we went to, this was when, was it the Nest in Hackney?
Yeah.
Had a pop-up. So I hope he's not watching this, but my friend brought a work colleague with him, and I was like, okay, well, it's a like, your whole concept is that the more the merrier, right? Like, it's a sharing thing. So I was like, yeah, it's cool. And he's come to, like a British Nigerian guy, and I think we spoke about it before with the whole concept. Sometimes it's a bit alien, especially maybe to people of Nigerian background, where maybe their idea of Nigerian cuisine is like very much in a rigid structure, and you kind of want to do something a little bit different. So obviously I'm very aware of that. My friend's very aware of that. My friend's tried to explain it to him, and when he's got there, it's like, no, I'm ordering this, and this is my, like, the idea of us sharing chicken wings was like, no, I'm going to have the chicken wings. But it's so funny you say that, because obviously he's not my friend, but the conversation dynamic was very different just as a result, because that is the whole concept of it. So it's like, yeah, now that you say that, I've seen it, like of the difference between you go to a restaurant, like a tapas restaurant, and you want the dishes for yourself, and sharing it in a group. So yeah, that's real. That's real.
I'm glad you've seen the insight there. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, true.
Yes, I was going to ask, what was the last book that you read that you would recommend to our Chop Chat Chiller community?
I'm going to keep this one quick, because it just touches on a lot of the stuff we've already talked, so I don't want to bring it back to that, but it really did change my mindset. Was a book called Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. So yeah, it touches a lot on, like, maybe people dealing with vulnerability and shame, and just the whole point of, without you maybe opening yourself up to be vulnerable, like, you never really experience like a truly rich life, and some of the reasons for that. So like, I listened to a lot of Brené Brown's podcasts. She's done TED Talks and things like that, and I found it really, really interesting. So I found the book, read it, and it just really, really opened my eyes. So I definitely would recommend it. I think it's like quite an informal read. There's just very real, like, examples that I think you're reading. Sometimes you're like, wow, that's actually me. But she always delivers it in like with a really nice amount of humor. So it's just not one of those kind of like really stuffy self-help books of like very Americanized, like, if you do this in your first 10 minutes of the day, you will increase your productivity by X, sort of thing. I just think it's brilliant. So I would really, really recommend that. It changed my outlook greatly.
It's I don't know, have you read it?
I haven't, no.
I've read it, like, yeah, Daring Greatly, Brené Brown. I think what's really good about it is actually she takes vulnerability and looks at it in a number of areas. So like there's like your own personal vulnerability, but then there's a section about how it would show up at work, and like maybe how you might manage differently, and also how you might parent differently. So it's kind of almost like it takes a whole like what am I trying to say, like this 360 view, as opposed to sometimes like the books you mentioned, sometimes just like, oh, it's about you, like, I don't know, almost in your house, and just be the best you, and then one day you'll become rich because you've learned to be vulnerable. Like, you know, that always seems the end goal. Like if you develop emotional health, then like you'll get rich.
Yes, that's exactly. You're right. I think it's the 360 aspect of it, which I think is why there's not many people I know who wouldn't take something from that. And I think sometimes like a lot of the curiosity that brings you to read maybe that stuff, it might be like you're thinking of it in a certain direction, but obviously there's a lot more than like vulnerability with just say like family or relationships or things like that. I think the workplace one is like a really interesting one as well. You're right, and obviously I'm not a parent, and I hope not intend to be anytime soon, but yeah, I probably will pick that up again if that ever happens. So yeah.
Okay, so now, and I'm wondering what you're going to say. I've been looking at you and thinking, what's your answer going to be to this?
Okay, bring it on.
If you could be in any boy band or a solo artist, who would you be and why?
So this is a setup because you never told me this could be a possible question. So now I feel attacked.
Feeling a little bit vulnerable as the conversation.
Really hard. I know it sounds a bit egotistical. I couldn't see myself in a boy band.
You say you don't see yourself in a boy band?
I couldn't see myself sharing like credit or creativity, or, you know, I'm all for like the togetherness, like maybe in the studio, like as a producer and this stuff. But no, I don't know. I don't even know. I'm trying to think of like a group that isn't. All I can think of is individualized. Maybe if I had any sort of like musical singing ability, the only thing that I can think of that comes to mind, and I hate it because it sounds so cringy and cliche, like cringy R&B, would be Division. Like if I could be like the third member of Division, then maybe that. But other than that,
member of which band?
Division. So they've got. So I've been listening to a lot of their. So it's spelled DVSN.
Oh, is that how you say it?
Yeah. Well, I think it is. This is what
I've never heard it.
I still don't know. I ain't even gonna try. I ain't gonna try and pretend that Uncle Mecca doesn't really understand.
I've always just said DVSN. I'm exposing myself when I talk anymore.
I was saying this last summer, and then someone corrected me, and was just like, "No, that's."
But how would you know it's Division? It doesn't.
I know, and it might. Maybe I've been set up. Maybe it is DVSN, and all your listeners are gonna just like.
So for anyone watching who's unsure, with the band we are talking about is DVSN maybe or Division.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe that, just because that's the only thing that I can think of that comes to mind. I like their music, but maybe I couldn't see myself in. I know I've got the baby face in that, but I couldn't see myself in like a pop, like a pop 4-piece, like a JLS type of thing, personally. But maybe people would disagree. So.
Okay. I can't believe it. Sorry, I haven't moved past it.
I must admit, like I'm literally just like, I need to go and look up who this DVSN Division. Like I'm just out of the loop.
We're losing so many cool points right now. Let's move on.
I know when you're like, oh, I thought you were hit. Like, I'm not gonna lie.
This is it. I hope I've got it right. Like who? And I was like, oh my god, I know one of them will know the band, but have I said it wrong? I'm hoping I'm right and that you're wrong, if it's for my.
No, I'm probably. I don't know anything. I live underneath a rock. Like
I know
their songs. The ones I know I like.
Reading things on Spotify. It's like the rapper or the rapper / singer. Is it Black? Is it Six Black?
Oh, yeah, that. Yeah, I don't say his name either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sorry.
Go.
Came to mind. The Roots. I'd love to be in the Roots.
The Roots.
Roots, yeah. If I could be in the Roots, that's a musically talented. And Questlove, the drummer, kind of is the producer. He's got a cookbook called like a mixtape cookbook. So every recipe has a link to like a song. So it's a Spotify playlist.
Yeah.
And it's just like the Roots. That's cool. I'm probably a bit too young for the Roots, but if the Division DVSN stuff doesn't work out and I'm not, then I'll go to the Roots. So yeah.
Okay, so you're sharing credit for the Roots. You don't mind that? Cool.
I really love the backup plans. Like that's what I'm trying to do. But if it doesn't work out, this is what
you got to stay flexible. Right? You
see how quickly life changes.
It's true.
I have these backup plans, right? The first option is like a solo career where I just flame out. So we'll see.
So before we wrap up, we've got one more question.
Yeah.
Go on. Don't be scared. It's all right. It's all right.
If you could be any animal, what animal would you be?
You know what? First instinct would be to say a cheetah just because I'm not fast. So I'd love to actually know what it's like to have like some proper speed. But beyond that, I don't know. Maybe like something. I don't know. Can you say an owl? I think like an owl would be like quite wise, but it'd be really boring to be an owl.
An owl.
Why is it? What's wrong with that?
I don't know. Like surely. No, I do like the idea of flying, like just being able to move around freely, maybe. But it just feels a bit boring. It feels maybe a bit fictional for me. I know, I don't know, just is.
They've got like the 360, isn't it?
Have
they got like 360 vision? Like they can just turn and like, or not? Well, I just made it up.
I'm not speaking anymore because it's on camera.
I'm not saying made that up. Wait. I was hoping someone was gonna back me up. I just like put it out there, and then
I think maybe that like they've got maybe beyond 180, maybe, but I don't know full 360.
Owl or a cheetah. The thing is, flying must be mad. Just imagine you could just be like, oh, I want to go here.
That's it. I just think that's
I really like the fly impression. Like it's super iffy. Just like, what is that? Not convinced by that.
I feel like there'd just be something like really cool and liberating about just being able to be like the same for me. Go like done. You know. So yeah, maybe an hour. Like I think it's a bit boring, but I'll go with that because otherwise we're going to be here for like another 15 minutes whilst I try to think of like everything.
Right, Craig the owl.
Nice.
Where are you flying to?
I don't know, right now somewhere a lot warmer. You know.
I'm curious, like if you could have wings now, where are you trying to go?
Oh.
But you're flying, like specifically flying, not you got on an airplane, like. Because I'm actually just flying to my corner shop. I would just like to be able to get there quicker. Like I'd like to get to Sainsbury's quicker.
Where would I like to go?
I'd probably fly somewhere with some coast.
Nice.
Yeah, because I can imagine flying all the way to, I don't know, like Nigeria or West Coast US for some sun is probably a bit long as an owl. So maybe just Brighton, maybe Cornwall, you know, somewhere.
Yeah.
Just I know something.
I'll be honest. I think if you're gonna go like, look, forget it. Like you can just go as far as you want because I'll tell you what, Craig, you're not actually an owl. So the fact that you imagine that you are.
Let me get this. You're telling me I'm not in a boy band and I'm not an owl. Like
I'm gonna break it to you, mate. I'm gonna break it to you. You're not.
No, but they get tired. I think if I was an owl, I'd hop on the plane.
I'm a performance nutritionist. So I'm thinking about fueling and strategies and speed, right? I mean, that's a long way to fly. So I don't think I've got it in me. Right now, I'm doing like 5Ks running, so I don't think I can do thousands of kilometers flying.
Nice.
Craig, I can't stop laughing. You could have a this bit.
Craig, I'm going to take over. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for sharing and chatting with us. Really enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun. So we'll see you very soon.
Take care.
Bye.